Hi, everyone. Welcome to this panel. Name it Music Beyond the Geek. Today we have here Chris Sharper, Natalia Fuchs, Juha van Zelfde, myself, Ikram Bulum. We will start with them introducing themselves, and then we go to the discussion. So, Natalia? Juha.
See?
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you very much
Let's
for that. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Juha van Zelfde. I run a collective called Progress Bar, which is a political party supporting radical club culture in Amsterdam. And I want to join Ash Sarkar, who moderated the previous panel, by expressing solidarity with all the festival workers, protesting for better working conditions, and without all of the workers, we cannot do this. So, yeah, I would. So I'll quickly run through the club night. It consists of talks, interviews, performances, new light designs, and all kinds of screen infrastructures. And I'll just give you an overview of what we've done in the past 5 years, and I'll try to do that in 5 minutes. So we always start with talks. This is Ash, did anybody see Ash's moderation earlier today? So this is Ash. She spoke at Progress Bar in 2016. Flavia Zodan, writer, filmmakers, Polina Medvedeva, Isaura Sanveryatmo. Then we go into interviews. So this is all club night still. We have club night going later on, starting at 10:30. This is around 9:30, 10 o'clock. We have people coming in. Everybody comes in for free. So if you come to the talks and the interviews, you don't have to pay. So we have students, young kids joining us very early on. So we interviews with the artists performing later on, such as Nikisi, Baby Mother, Lotic, endless artists. So when we move into the club, we have performances. So by now you will know about these artists. You've heard them talk about the politics, the technicalities, the spatial conditions and challenges of making music, performing music, the political, cultural, economic setbacks and exclusions and inequalities. So we have dancers performing, not just musicians. We have massive performance in an old church. We have smaller performances. Then we have screens. We always use these screens. We build custom screens, or we have, every club night we have a different setup. This was our biggest screen, or maybe these two have been our biggest screens. LED screens to create a video game environment or like a visual overflow. It's sick. It's really nice. It's really fun. Then this is another one. And then this is another setup in collaboration with students from the Sandberg Institute Shadow Channel. So we always bring in visual art and light designs. And we work with all kinds of artists, trying to experiment with the experience of the club night. Kind of have, if you have futurist music, you want to have a futurist environment as well, and experience the political intensity of this art form. Lotic is performing here at Sónar as well. This is them performing. Oh yeah, and this is what it then looks like and sounds like a bit. And then the last bit of the presentation is that we work with designers to develop and think about how the hell do you get people to come to your club night when they don't know who the artists are because they're all young and new, haven't performed in your city before. The music they play doesn't have a genre name yet, and it's kind of a mixed bunch of communities working together. So we previously worked with Michael Oswell, designer, who made these posters and this campaign, which are like little science fiction stories about the future of the world based on what's happening around us. And then for the third season, we worked with Sam Rolfs, and I'll just show that video, and that should be the last video that I'll show. It lasts 1 minute, and it's basically a flyer, but a flyer made in video using motion capture, stand-up comedy, YouTube response video. And in there's the lineup of the event.
Hey guys, today I want to take a second, take a second and think about this video that's been circulating. The allegations, implication of the Capsona child and these proposed past-future timelines that did not occur, will not occur, and why it's come back into the public consciousness, I honestly don't know, but I feel like today is the time to take a second and consider these. So look here, okay, if you look at the video right here, right there, 808 Inc., right? You see that? You zoom in, this, right here, AART, A-A-R-E. You see it? You see it? I mean, if you look on there, you can see, regardless of whether the city is live or not, it's in here. You can see the trails left by these people. And we talk about this every week, guys. You have to take control of your avatar, not only does it flaunt simulation regulations and avatar persona and Cloud Consciousness Enforcement Act, but I don't care what fucking Kovco is saying, the messages that are being posted about what Gage is saying, how he thinks that, oh well, asking these questions, where is the Capsona? This is smokescreen, this is false flag shit. Guys, we've come so far, but we have had this socially agreed upon contract that we do not disrupt these representations of ourselves. And the fact that Gaika, look, right here, in this part right here, you look, Gaika, right there. The fact that 808 Inc., Arab Mastani, Art, City, Kovco, Gage, Gaika, Gloria, Koji Radical, Mad Max, S4U have shown increased activity this far means we need to pay attention on the second.
Incredible. Well,
So
thanks,
that's it.
Juha.
Thank you.
Super incredible. And now, Natalia, if you want, you can introduce
hello,
you.
everyone. My name is Natalia Fuchs, and I'm curator and one of the co-organizers of GAMMA Festival that is happening in St. Petersburg in Russia every year. And next year will be the 5th anniversary for our festival. And this is quite a large scale event happening in Russia, which is run independently, what is quite rare for such scales, I would say. And last year we hosted about 12,000 visitors from very different countries in Russia. I would like you to see the post-movie of last year of the festival and then tell about our programming and the experimental projects we run.
Okay. Yeah,
The
let's
video.
see the video, please. Thanks.
I just did a Facebook post with a nice photo. Everybody's always asking, Berlin, what is it all about, this city? And it will finish soon, so what is the new Berlin? And I thought, like, today, St. Petersburg could be the new Berlin.
The first thing what really strikes me in St. Petersburg, I think St. Petersburg is more the cultural capital.
The architecture, those bridges everywhere, people kissing on the bridge, and like the sun was shining.
I had so much different concepts in my head about the country, and now, it's shifting.
It cannot be otherwise. You cannot be not impressed by St. Petersburg, actually.
You see a perfect mix between European culture and also Russian culture.
Very positive, super positive.
What does it mean, art?
Art is what makes us humans different than animals. multidisciplinarity, like having music, having visual arts, having installations. This is the art of now.
Artists are very important kind of people in our society because they help us engage with ideas and the world around us in ways that we don't realize and we don't see.
There's a lot of things you can talk about music. You can do business, but you can do creative.
And that's, I think, also the role of a festival, is you, in a short time, you give out a lot of energy, you push a lot of program together.
In that case, GAMMA is doing a really logical concept.
They want to establish something like a community in Russia.
The first thing is good technique.
They have a focus, they have an idea, a concept.
Everything looks really professional, so perfect.
This is something I appreciate much more than just the standard festival.
A festival where everything comes together as a community.
You should go through all the states, all the different components.
The space, the venue, the place itself has a soul of its own.
You get to talk, you get to educate, you get to maybe open up people's ideas of what the music is, what the culture is.
That helps, for example, people that are interested in techno music to suddenly realize that Rachmaninoff maybe is not so far away from techno music.
It looks like a really good space for people to have creative freedom.
But with GAMMA, I have also the feeling that the people are really lift music. You know, it's not at all about like making this festival to make money or to get famous or to get connections or to push their careers. Just lovers. There's lovers of art and music.
I think Russians are very, very great creators.
But people are really enthusiastic at this festival.
A festival where you can exchange with the public, where you can make new friends, and where you fall in love with the organizers because they give so much heart blood into it.
Plus a very good sound system and a huge crowd with lots of energy, so you can't ask for more than this.
Keep going. Yeah, you're on a good way.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, so the festival is just over. So basically I had like 2 days between GAMMA and Sónar. And we had 4 days of the festival that we, for now, program in more or less stable way already. So we have the huge professional part, which is international conference. It's called GAMMA Pro, and this is a conference about culture for social innovation for art, science, and technology. And we used to work and invite many international speakers to bring this agenda into like cultural discourse in Russia, what is very unique. And then, of course, the intense music program of very different genres. This could cover experimental music, neoclassical music, techno music, and all different other interesting music genres what we would like to represent in the country. Like this year, we collaborated with Creative Europe, and we actually hosted Shape Showcase in Russia. So there were more than 10 artists and new European names presented at GAMMA, with a participant of many other international festivals and Shape itself. And of course, this kind of independent curation and independent organization of the festival helps us to be very brave with a new concept that we imagine and then organize for the festival. Like last year, we had the whole laboratory, the experimental laboratory in music and artificial intelligence, and this ended up with the AI stage at GAMMA Festival that represented about 5 performances. The performances that showed the visitors of the festival how contemporary musicians can work with the technologies related to AI, such as machine learning and machine vision. So that was very interesting to bring in this kind of conceptual project in the heart of techno festival. And this created a bit different vision, I think, for the audience also on what we can do and how freely we can actually work with the music representation in the space of the festival. So, yeah, that's it.
Thanks so much, Natalia. Sounds super, super nice. And what about you, Chris?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Chris. I'm from the Barbican in London. How many people know what that is? How much boring explanation do people require? Lots of people know what it is. Okay, so just briefly, it's an arts centre, and the thing that makes it distinctive pretty much everywhere is that we have lots of art forms under one roof and as part of the same organisation. So we have contemporary and classical music, we have art galleries, cinemas, 2 theatres, and a big learning and education programme as well. And what's interesting about working there is that the art forms cross-fertilise in interesting ways, and often not very formal ways. They sort of spring out of conversations between the colleagues who have expertise in their different art forms, and their kind of passions and knowledge can kind of leach gradually into your own way of thinking about your own art form. So I curate the contemporary music programme, which happens mostly, although not exclusively, in our concert hall, which is a 2,000 capacity concert hall. And really, what I'm going to talk about in a moment is the way. I don't have a video, by the way. I'm just going to use words, so I hope that's okay. What I'm going to talk about in a moment is the various ways that we've used our sort of position and our resources to try and inject new ways of looking at the concert experience and making sure that the building, which is after all a sort of 19th century construct, this kind of room that orchestras play in, kind of can remain relevant and exciting in the 21st century and hopefully beyond. But before I sort of talk about that, I'm just going to make a few kind of wider remarks about why this idea of music beyond the gig and beyond the kind of standard live experience feels important, and why it feels timely to be thinking about this. My background actually is working for record companies. For the first sort of 15 or so years of my quote-unquote career, I was doing A&R and things for labels. And I stopped doing that about 10 years ago and started doing events, concerts. And I think part of the reason I decided to do that was a sense that obviously for many years labels were at the sort of heart of the business. They were the kind of center of gravity around which all the other activity revolved. But I think there's been a shift, and the shift has accompanied the way, of course, that we all consume music. Once upon a time, fans would use, physical objects as emblems of their connection with the artist that they loved. But music's become atomized. It's all around us, and it's intangible. And so I think in the absence of physical objects to kind of champion and celebrate, people now bond over shared experience of being in the same room, being in the presence of the artist that they experience, and cherishing those moments instead of objects, which is wonderful, and it's democratic, and it's you know, I'm all for living in the moment. The downside to that is that, there's a big moat around becoming a record company. It's, you know, you have to have distribution and manufacturing expertise and resource to finance projects in advance, whereas there's much less of a moat around events and concerts, just because of the way the cash flow works, because you can rent things rather than having to own them. There's all kinds of reasons why it's much easier to set yourself up as an events promoter than it is to set yourself up as a label or a distributor. I'm speaking in general, of course. There are obviously specific examples that are different, but what we've seen certainly in London, I think in lots of other places as well, is a real intensification of the amount of live music and live events on offer. There's just tons of stuff, and I think in this very busy landscape, in this landscape where there's just so much to explore as a music fan, it's really, really important for me as a curator and for us as an organization to find ways that we can be distinctive and ways that we can offer artists opportunities that they wouldn't get in other places. And part of the reason for doing that is altruistic. It's because we want to further artists' careers, and we want to champion the people who we think are exciting and creative. But part of that is obviously selfish as well. We want our program to be distinctive. You know, at any given moment, you know, there are 2,000 things you can do in London, and we want people to come to the Barbican and feel like it's relevant and exciting, and that the production values are great and the content's innovative and all of that stuff. And luckily, we, as a publicly funded arts institution, have resource to devote to this kind of almost philosophical challenge of how you move beyond the simple fact of putting artists and music on a stage and people in a room watching them on a stage and just seeing what happens. This is where being part of a sort of cross-arts organisation is really valuable, because I get to draw on the experience of colleagues who work with stage designers and set designers, who work with choreographers, people who work with video and filmmakers, people who work with technology, to offer artists the opportunity to expand the way they think about the simple act of performing, if indeed it is a simple act. So I hope during the course of the conversation that we have, I can maybe talk in more detail about some of the projects. I've been doing this for 10 years, so there's like hundreds of projects, and I really don't want to just run through a list because it would bore the tits off you and me. But there's sort of categories of areas of things that I've explored during the career in various ways. So, you know, I've done shows which do things using techniques from theatre, set design, entrances and exits, deus ex machina, and ways to disguise the fact that sometimes you're working with artists who don't want to be on the stage. I've found ways to present artists without them actually having to perform at all. Obviously, I've done things where we've collaborated with visual artists, with photographers, with video makers, with even painters, you know, as part of a live performance. There's the obvious, or more obvious things that lots of people do wherein they're exploring with technology, you know, multimedia, bespoke AV content, lasers, all of this kind of stuff. There's a lot of people working in that sphere now, but the people who are doing it incredibly well are the ones that I'm searching out and trying to help develop their practice. We've done lots of work around film soundtracks, about commissioning people to specifically respond to visuals, to bring the cinematic and the musical side by side. I've done projects with poets, spoken word, dancers, other kinds of movement. And of course, I've simply expanded the kind of palette that musicians have had to work with. So lots of the program has been based around, as it were, using the expertise we have in-house with classical music, with access to orchestras and orchestrators and arrangers, to give artists the opportunity to work with bigger ensembles, to reimagine their music as an acoustic palette rather than just maybe the electronic sounds that they started with originally. So, you know, there's literally hundreds of things I've tried over the years, some with more success than others. But I think each of them in their own way were trying to think about what we can do that's more than just, you know, the concert and move beyond the gig, the title of the talk. So let's talk about it, see what happens.
Thanks, Chris. Well, three of you are working in museums, art centers, universities, clubs. And my first question is about how, I mean, you have the chance to educate the music reception. How you deal with this responsibility, or how you take it, no? I mean, you are like the ones who are teaching us how we party, or what is the new party thing, or new club? What do you think about that? More.
For us, it's first and foremost about representation. So who has access to clubs? Who has access to money? Who's allowed to perform? Who's allowed to invite? Because Chris said that promoting is maybe easier than releasing. But for a lot of people, clubs are really expensive. CDJs are really expensive. Mixes are really expensive. There's a lot of economic risk in hosting your club night. So if you start out, there's quite a big entry barrier to doing this.
By comparison with running a record company,
sorry,
I was saying, not in general.
Didn't want to nitpick. However, the reality of clubs is that they, at least in the Netherlands, and I have some experience in the UK as well, they are quite homogeneous, and it's very white, it's very male, and you need money. So it's often people of privilege. So for us, coming back to the beginning of the answer, it's about representation and economic equality.
Okay.
I think that for us, it makes a lot of sense to work with the shared expertise in the community, because especially when you work in the interdisciplinary art, and like the case I was describing, the lab on artificial intelligence and music, then of course you have to program such things, in basically inviting experts from this area from different countries and different intersections from art and technology. So if you have this chance to work with the experts from different fields and represent the shared expertise, then this kind of a shared responsibility is also something very important. I think in such kind of experimental projects, it's actually a crucial thing to work with, because having like a large-scale festival, as in our case, you have so many risks to represent something like completely not relevant to the audience at the end, and that would be a very bad, just to name it, conceptual, you know. So in case with artificial intelligence, it often happens. So I'm very much concerned always about this shared expertise question.
Yeah, I think organizationally, we're proud to take risks. We're all the individual curators and programmers across all the art forms have positively encouraged to sort of try things out, and to constantly think about refreshing the audiences that come through the building. There's something like, on average, 65 to 70% of the people who come to every concert I do has never attended the Barbican before. And so it's really important to me to keep exploring ways to bring people into this kind of citadel of culture and reassure them that it can be for them. But equally, we're trying to take creative risks by supporting artists who we think want to stretch themselves, who want to make statements which are reinvigorating the art form, and hopefully making things that are, you know, mind-blowing and satisfying for people to come and see. I think I had a conversation once with a guy called Ben Marshall who works at the Opera House in Sydney and who's much cleverer than me. And he once said to me that you need to think in 3 ways. You need to think about whether there is an audience for what you're trying to present. You need to think about whether it aligns with your institutional values. And then you need to say, look, if nobody comes and it's a complete disaster, am I proud that we did it anyway? And ideally, you're looking for projects that tick all of those boxes. So I think very, very hard about audiences. I think very, very hard, as my colleagues do, about the diversity of the artists that we represent. But also, I just want to feel proud and excited and energized by what we're doing.
Okay, and what do you think about what are the active agents in the spaces or shows in which you are working nowadays? I mean, now we are not talking just about musicians and audiences. There is more professionals or, I mean, active agents involved in the stuff you are creating, no? I mean, can you tell them about this structure?
I think now it's more and more about all kinds of production forces, because if you work with art and technology, art and science in particular, then it's a huge production, which is what is behind basically any other project or performance. And here it's very important to work with the trustful people, and also this kind of people coders or people that help you to basically elaborate some experimental initiatives and give it like a green light on a conceptual level. They are nowadays very active agents, at least in what I curate for the festival. And of course, when you also engage with institutional circles, then people that work with you, bringing institutional initiatives happening at the festival, then it's always something to work with. Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, one of the things that is a crucial part of the job really is knowing enough about what's achievable in technical and practical terms in the spaces that you're working in, to guide artists at the creative stage when they're creating the project. I mean, I have done like really, really mad things. You know, I've had pianos standing in tanks of water. I've had pianos swinging from the ceiling on ropes. I've had multiple lasers. I've had people dancing around naked. I've had, I mean, I lose track of the number of pointlessly ridiculous things. Drones. I once did a concert with John Cale where we had 20 drones flying above the orchestra with speakers attached to them, above the audience. So, you know, I'm willing to have all kinds of exciting technical conversations with artists and their collaborators to try and work out how we can deliver things. But fundamentally, even more than money, is a big constraint that I have in my world is time. In the Barbican, the concert hall, is an incredibly busy place. There's a concert happening every day of the year. You don't get days to come in and build and design your set and test everything. You know, it's a real luxury even to have a whole day where you can get in at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I'm always balancing the ambition of what we want to achieve against the reality of the resources that we have at our disposal. And usually the only way you can solve problems of time is by spending more money. So the other thing you need to know about is how to make it work financially.
What about you, Juha?
Well, for us it's about, just wrote it down, to build kind of a radical and resilient community through intersectional solidarity and collective joy. So it's really about inviting artists that express the existential intensities of living today under extinctionism, fascism, capitalism, all these terrible things that are happening, and are finding ways to generate hope, to connect to people, to build solidarity, not just to feel alive and whole at that moment, but also to overcome this situation and build political alliances to take down these systems of oppression and inequality, and use art and use the visceral power and imagination of music and art and dancing, kind of the visceral intensity of dance music builds a community, builds a collective, makes you connect to people you didn't know before, that aren't in your social strata. And through that you build friendship, build community, build political power in order to change the world. So we have much more kind of airy, utopian ambition with the club night, hence calling it a political party.
Yeah, sure.
So it's almost, when we could change it into a communist party, but that would kind of also scare people off. But it kind of is a communal party where through dance music and through the collective experience, you build a bigger community of more that kind of represents the intersectionality of life.
Yeah, that's true. I have another question, more like in the line of artificial intelligence and political space. And what do you think about, can artificial intelligence have the same space of voice as the human space in the near future, in the creating stuff that you are doing? I mean, talking about these polyphonic voices, I don't know.
I would say that like one of the outcomes of the laboratory we had recently and when we were preparing for the stage was the way we actually collaborate with the AI and the way we interact as a human with a non-human, because it's a very specific way to let or not let it go and perform in a way when not always just the human logic is actually playing the main role. So this was I think that it already has quite a voice in such type of projects in particular. So you have always to balance this thing that there is a human perception and there is some logic that we don't really understand, but we have to deal with it. So this is cool.
I did a project earlier this year with the Oxford Professor for the Public Understanding of Science, a guy called Marcus de Sautoy, and he was very interested in investigating various aspects of the intersection between AI and creativity. And one of the things that we did as part of this project is that we trained an AI composer on a load of scores from the Baroque period, keyboard scores. And then what we did is we took a piece of music by Bach, a relatively obscure piece of music by Bach, and we, at various points in the composition, inserted bars that had been written by the AI composer, and then we moved back and forth between the Bach and the AI. And what we did also at the same time is we had a machine learning system on the stage which enabled the audience to vote. We gave everyone a little card which had a robot face on one side and a smiley human face on the other side. And we asked people to hold up the card and spin it around. When they thought they were listening to a robot composer or an AI composer, they held up the robot side. And when they thought they were listening to Bach, they held up the smiley human face. And it was interesting in tons of ways. One of the ways that was interesting is that to somebody who doesn't know about how composed music works, the AI was pretty convincing. You know, it sounded kind of like Baroque music. But to the performer, the harpsichord player called Mahan Esfahani, who had to play this piece, he said that he could always tell the second he crossed the bar line out of Bach into the AI, because suddenly his fingers didn't fall in ways that felt like his fingers would fall if he was playing Bach. And more importantly, he felt that with Bach there was a sense of an overarching structure. The 15-minute or however long it took to play the piece had an internal logic. The AI was able to do things which sounded very similar to Bach for a bar at a time, but it wasn't able to think in terms of those structural stretches. Thirdly, the vast majority of people in the room who were not classical musicians couldn't tell. They couldn't tell. They were just flipping their cards. Oh, is that a human? Is that a robot? I don't know. So my short answer to that question is it depends who you ask. Some people will always hear things, with the current state of the technology, people will hear things in AI music which they find to be unacceptable and not musical. Other people, maybe their standards aren't so high.
What do you think, Juha? Talking about collectivity and
I mean,
there is space for
For us, as long as there are artists that are not being represented and platformed, human artists, queer and trans artists, working class artists, artists of color, artists with disabilities, we'll focus on them first, and then we'll, in the meantime, follow the AI developments. But I think it's going to take a while for an AR to perform a progress bar as long as these inequalities are structural.
Okay. So I don't know if anyone, if the audience has any questions for them. Yeah, there is. Okay, we don't have time, sorry.
Oh,
Okay, well, thanks so much, Chris, Natalia, and Juha.
Okay, thank you.
For your words.